Have you ever been in the middle of a date with someone and you've noticed some little warning signs? Maybe they only talked about themselves or didn't ask you any questions or ignored some boundaries. And you thought, that's a red flag right there. Well, just like in dating, your search for the right wedding vendors comes with its very own set of warning signs. And if you ignore these red flags, it can lead to some real headaches like forfeited booking fees or a last minute scramble when a vendor cancels, or worse, memories that just can't be replaced if something goes badly wrong. So today I'm unpacking what those red flags look like when you're hiring vendors for your big day with a list of the 5 biggest warning signs that I believe you need to be aware of. So you'll learn how to spot when a wedding vendor is more interested in their own needs than yours, how to protect yourself from unreliable service, and why listening to your gut, just like in dating, can save you from heartache, stress, wasted time and money, and disappointment. So let's get stuck into it. Unbridely is a community of pro-wedding vendors who believe in freedom and integrity in weddings, giving you options, solutions, tips and tricks to create the experience and memories that you and your fiancé really want and deserve. Because we believe that weddings are a team sport. With how-tos, stories and interviews with recently married couples, we find out what went right and what they'd change if they could go back and do it all over again. I'm Camille and welcome to the Unbridely podcast. To help you spot trouble before it starts, I'm going to break down these big red flags into 5 distinct groups. Each one of these are a sign to slow down. Just like in dating, just like in relationships. Whoa, slow down. Ask some more questions, or maybe just simply keep looking for a vendor who is right for you. And before I dig in, I also want to say that we're all human. And I personally have certainly made some of these mistakes over the years. So it's also a good indicator, a good rule of thumb, if you like, to look at the intention behind the action. Because sometimes people get stuff wrong. But I believe, if they sincerely apologize, if they try to make up for the error, that mistake, or that oversight, it might be worth it to give them the benefit of the doubt. So, as with all advice, if you take this with a grain of salt, trust your instincts and protect yourself and your day where you feel you need to, you'll be on really good footing. So, with each of these 5 red flags, I also want to share some real life stories to give you some practical tips to protect yourself so you can focus on what really matters rather than putting out fires in the lead up to your wedding on the day or days of, too. So, number 1, for me, the big red flag that often shows itself early in your search for a wedding vendor and in the planning process are payment and pricing issues. So, yeah, one of the most important and potentially risky areas when you're hiring a wedding vendor, what you're going to pay them and when. So, first up, beware of vendors. That sounds really like ominous, but yeah, beware. It's like a sign at the zoo. Beware of vendors who demand full payment upfront. I think it's fair to say it's standard industry practice to pay a booking fee to secure your date, with the balance due closer to your wedding. So if a vendor insists on all the money straight away, it's a bit of a red flag. It could mean that they're desperate for the cash flow, or worse, they might not deliver as they're promising you. So remember, if you've already paid everything and something goes wrong, you have little to no leverage. So then next, watch out for suspiciously low prices or pay in full cash discounts. If a wedding vendor's rates are significantly below the average in your area, you need to ask yourself why. So it might be that they're inexperienced. It might just be that they're cutting corners, or even worse, they're running a bit of a shady operation. And it sounds like an urban legend, right? But they are out there. And you just don't want to be one of those victims that ends up on a current affair. And While I understand saving money is a tempting lure, your wedding is a once in a lifetime event. You want quality and reliability and not just a bargain. You hope to get all three, right? Quality, reliability, and a bargain. So just keep looking. Another warning sign is unclear or changing pricing. So sometimes a wedding vendor will give you vague quotes or add surprise fees, surprise add ons, or, and this is, eh, you wouldn't think it would happen, but some vendors refuse to put things in writing. It's just, oh, well, it's around about 3,500. Well, is it 3,500 or is it a roundabout? Not pinning down that price or changing the prices with added extras is a major issue. You need to get a detailed written estimate or quote that spells out exactly what's included and what is not. And that way, there are no nasty little surprises down the road. And finally, just be a little bit cautious if a vendor only accepts cash payments. Because while some vendors, they'll say we offer cash discounts, if they refuse other types of payment, it could be a bit of a sign that they're trying to avoid a paper trail, so to speak, which is another red flag for you. It means that they don't have accountability, that you can't prove that you gave them the money. So, in summary, always insist on a clear written contract or an estimate or quote, a reasonable payment schedule. 1 or 2 payments is good. Personally, I offer 3 payments because I like to eat more than just baked beans in winter. And also, I like my couples to be able to spread out their payments as well to help their cash flow in their own homes. And if a vendor's payment or pricing practices seem a bit off, trust your instincts and just keep looking. Your wedding and your peace of mind are absolutely worth it. All right. Red flag number 2. And this is one that snuck in a bit with some, I got to say, new vendors coming onto the scene. It's not always, but sometimes they just are not up to scratch. And this can be one that is perpetrated by new vendors as much as older or more experienced vendors. When wedding suppliers are new and on the scene, they might not know the standard. And when they've been around for a while, sometimes they just don't care. So, poor communication and or professionalism. What are the warning signs here? Firstly, pay attention to how quickly and consistently a wedding vendor responds to you. Even with your initial communications, the first email, DM, text, whatever it is, if you're left waiting for several days or even weeks for replies, or if your messages are ignored altogether, that is a big silky red flag right there. I'm not saying people don't get busy. I'm not saying, especially those vendors who are out in the field doing the flowers, doing the photography and everything, that they don't get busy. But a vendor who is truly invested in your wedding will make communication with you a priority. And a really good rule of thumb is if you're not getting clear, timely responses before you book a service or product, it's only going to get worse after you pay them the booking fee. Yeah, it's not going to get better. So be aware of that. Next, you want to watch out for vague or evasive answers. Like with anyone, oh, it depends. I bet it does. So if a vendor dodges questions about their services, their pricing, their availability, I'm finding this really interesting at the moment. My very good friend and colleague, Vicky Flanagan, who is also a celebrant here in South Australia, we have this code and we use it all the time. If things are interesting, means things are fucked up. So, yeah, it's interesting at the moment about availability. I'm hearing about a few vendors who are cherry picking their bookings. That means they keep some wedding couples waiting to know their availability so then they can say yes to others. who might not have gotten back to them yet, or they want to keep the date open because it's a popular date, or maybe they just don't want to travel as far. And I mean, anyone can run their business any way they want to, but I think that's a bit shit to treat people like that. Yeah, I don't love it. So if anyone is changing the subject when you ask for details, it's a sign that they might not be trustworthy or they're putting their own needs ahead of yours, which is all right, of course, to an extent, but you deserve straightforward, honest information, especially when you're making such important decisions and shelling out a lot of cash. So, unprofessional behavior is another big warning sign. So, this can mean anything. And, this sounds really nitpicky, but you can see them coming, I think, from really poor grammar and spelling in emails. It's not that they've just missed something, it's not getting a few letters back to front. It's consistent and it's lazy. And it means they don't care. Or when vendors are talking negative about other clients or vendors, or they're showing up late or unprepared for meetings, not rocking up to rehearsals. Unbelievable. I mean, not everyone does rehearsals, I understand, but if you've agreed to it, you got a time, you got a place, and you don't rock up. Like, that does not compute for me. So your vendor should treat you and your wedding with respect and care, and anything less than that is unacceptable. And finally, be wary if a vendor is unwilling to meet in person or via video call or, on the phone. Not every vendor can meet face to face, especially if they're based far away. You've got a destination wedding or something, but a refusal to connect at all before you book them in can be a sign that they're not fully committed to you, your wedding, and your experience. Because you need people who make you feel heard, respected, and valued. Yes? If you notice poor communication, unprofessional behavior, a bit of a lack of being upfront with you, then trust your instincts and keep looking. Your wedding day is too important to leave to chance, or with someone who doesn't treat it with the care and professionalism it deserves. So I'd love to talk about a real life example here that highlights the importance of clear communication between couples and their vendors. I recently heard about a situation from a colleague in the wedding industry, and it really drives home what can go wrong when vendors don't put the couple's needs first. So at a recent wedding, a photographer was hired to capture the day, and the couple expected that it would be the photographer rocking up, or perhaps a second shooter, but only if that had been agreed upon in advance, of course. But when the wedding day arrived, the photographer brought along with them a content creator. So someone whose job it was to capture behind the scenes footage and videos on a phone, on a mobile phone, not for the couple though, but for the photographer's own marketing and social media channels. Because here's the thing, whether it's a second shooter or a content creator, it can be a clown, a juggler. It doesn't matter. No extra person should be present at your wedding without your knowledge and consent. And in this case, the couple wasn't consulted at all. They had no idea this extra person would be there. And they certainly didn't realise their private wedding moments might be used for someone else's marketing. Now, I don't know what the result of this was, but the danger is that it might have left the couple getting married feeling uncomfortable and like someone had intruded upon their day. And what really stood out to my colleague who told me about this was how easily this could have been handled differently. It doesn't need to be a big disaster. It doesn't need to be a big deal if the photographer had simply had a conversation with the couple beforehand, explained what they wanted to do, and asked for permission. It could have been a beautiful, positive experience for everyone, but instead, it came across as entitled and disrespectful, putting the vendor's own promotion and ego ahead of the couple's experience on their wedding day. Big red flag, but for them, it happened too late. There was nothing they could do. And I've got another story that illustrates bad communication and perhaps a lack of professionalism as well. So a recently married couple reached out to me and they had a poor experience from their celebrant. They said that the celebrant ghosted them and then finally got back to them after double booking in a cooler couple. So this is on Instagram. This is in a DM. So I replied, oh my God, did the celebrant actually say that? Was it an inquiry that you had with them, or had you paid a booking fee? Were they your celebrant, or had you just, messaged them and asked for their availability and their prices, etc.? They got back and said we had paid a deposit, which we call the booking fee, and had signed a contract as well. And the couple felt, that it was made abundantly clear on the celebrant's social media when they expressed several times about this couple that took their place and their wedding date. The couple did say, though, we ended up with an absolute gem of a celebrant who honestly went above and beyond, and we could not have been happier. So we definitely got the better end of it. So then I asked the couple, what were the red flags? Looking back, could you tell that this celebrant might let you down? Was there any indication that they might be unreliable? And they said, I think the communication, because it was either an immediate reply or they didn't hear from them for days and days or weeks. So they thought that was a bit odd at the start. And the couple also said that they know that people in the wedding industry are busy, because you're going out there, you're doing the job, you're not always in front of your computer or on your phone, answering messages, emails, etc. But the couple felt like if you have a booked client and they had paid a booking fee, there was a contract, then there should be some sort of continuity of service, and that even an out of office email, the one that you get back that's automatic that says, hey, I'm not here right now, I work these days, even that would have been fine and they wouldn't have a problem with that. They also mentioned that it was a bit odd when they were certain they wanted things in their ceremony. So they wanted a recognition of their mum who had passed away, and the celebrant tried to talk them out of it. So now that they look back, this was also a red flag for them. Red flag number 3 is contract and business practice concerns. Sounds boring, doesn't it? But your wedding contracts with your vendors are so much more than just annoying paperwork. They are there primarily. I mean, the vendor hands it to you. It's for their protection, of course, but it's there for your protection as well. Because if a vendor doesn't give you a clear, detailed contract, it's a major red flag. So first up, you're always insisting on a written contract. Never work with a vendor who refuses to put your agreement in writing. A solid contract spells out exactly what products or services you'll receive, when you'll receive them, and what will happen if something goes wrong. If a vendor tries to operate on a handshake or vague promises, you have my permission. Please feel free to walk away, because these are not the professionals you want handling your big day. And next, when you have that contract, please read the fine print. And of course, there isn't any fine print. It just means read it all. A good contract should be specific. And so look for clear service descriptions, not just wedding photography, but how many hours, how many photographers, what products, if it's just the prints themselves, are they being delivered digitally? Are you getting any albums with that? Are you getting any other printed products? Everything. You need it all in there. So dates, times, locations, when and where that wedding vendor will arrive, start and finish their work. A payment schedule, which is just, it simply means a breakdown of what's the booking fee? How do you lock them in? What's the due dates for the payments? And what are the final balances? How much are you paying when? You want to see cancellation and refund policies, because what happens if you need to cancel or reschedule? And what happens if your vendor needs to cancel? What happens? You need to know upfront, not just when there's an issue. And liability and insurance. A wedding vendor should be insured, and the contract should clarify who is responsible if something goes wrong. Keep a watch out for vague or incomplete contracts. So if it's missing key details, it uses language you don't understand, or leaves room for misinterpretation, it's another warning sign. And finally, have someone double check it. Have a look at it yourself, but have someone go over it as well. Are there hidden fees? Are there unclear deliverables? Is there restrictive copyright or usage rights for photos and videos? They can be buried in the contract as well. Now, they might be standard, they might be extended rights, or they might be very unfair to you. So make sure you read them. Make sure you understand them upfront before any money changes hands. Take your time, ask the questions, and don't sign until you're comfortable. You still haven't written your vows yet, have you? Let me help. In around 20 minutes or so, you can easily write personalised wedding vows unlike anything you've heard before that will make your fiancé feel like the most loved, understood and appreciated person on the planet. The How to Write Wedding Vows That Don't Suck instant download 17-page PDF ebook walks you through a step-by-step format for your vows, how to find the right words and phrases to describe your feelings and your fiancé, how to write that crucial first draft, and create your final wedding vows masterpiece. So if you don't know how or even where to start, if you've been Googling your little heart out, or if you've been calling them wedding vows, AEIOU, this ebook is for you. Included in there are also some bonus secrets for getting the most out of your wedding ceremony. So make sure you download your copy right now and get Write Your Wedding Vows crossed off your to-do list today. The link is in the show notes. And a wedding coordinator shared a story that sticks with them to this day. So their client booked a studio for photo and video services, So instead of, let's just say the photographer's name is Jack. Instead of hiring Jack, booking Jack, paying Jack a booking fee and getting a contract from Jack, and Jack turns up to photograph your wedding, a studio is thought of like an agency. So there is a name. It could be Jack Studio. Let's call it Jack Studio for argument's sake. So Jack Studio would be run by Jack, absolutely, but Jack can't do all of the bookings that Jack takes. So Jack might have Mary and Bob with them to take the other wedding bookings. So the wedding coordinator who's told me this has a client who's booked a studio for photo and video services, but there was no contact before the wedding. And in fact, they wouldn't reply to the wedding coordinator's couple. So the wedding coordinator contacted the photo and video team, which isn't exactly normal, but as a coordinator, they might want to touch base, might be reasonable. The coordinator was trying to help the couple because the couple was starting to get distressed. So the coordinator contacted the studio team 3 times over the time frame of 2 months with no replies. So they had emailed, they DM'd on socials, and there was no phone number listed to be able to call. The only way that the wedding coordinator could get in contact with this studio was to click on one of their sponsored ads on social media. So the studio comes back and says to the coordinator, we only want to talk to the couple, which, pretty standard. That's fair, to be honest, because they're the ones who have paid the money and booked in the photography, videography studio. Apart from not being able to get in touch and not responding to the couple, the real issue that the coordinator had with this was that the photographer and videographer weren't assigned until the week of the wedding. So that means that the couple getting married couldn't have any communication with the people who are actually rocking up on the day, taking the photos, etc. That can sometimes not feel great from the couple getting married's point of view. The coordinator did say that the people that were sent were amazing on the day, but of course they were subcontractors. It was, what do I call them? Bob and Lucy? I don't know. They weren't Jack. They were subcontractors of Jack's studio. The couple got about 10 sneak peek photos, which are photos that are given to you to stop you freaking out as you're waiting for all of the edits to happen and the full gallery to be delivered to you, the full services that the photographer or videographer had promised or contracted. These sneak peeks, they usually are delivered to the couple within about 48 hours, give or take. There's not a flat industry standard that everyone adheres to. But the idea is it's to whet your appetite. It's to be able to send it out and go, hey, we got married. So they're sneak peeks. However, their full gallery took over 3, and the wedding coordinator estimates it might have even been 4 months with no time frame at all specified in their contract. So this means the couple were just going, okay, we've got 10 photos. When are we getting the rest? And they had no idea. So they just sat and waited for 3 to 4 months. So again, this one might be a case of you get what you pay for, not great communication, and maybe business practice concerns as well as your red flags. Red flag number 4, reputation and experience. Oh boy. When you're choosing a wedding vendor, their reputation and experience are quite frequently among the most important factors you're going to consider, right? Because after all, you want these pros who have proven themselves with other couples, i.e., made mistakes in the past and can deliver on their promises. So here's what to watch out for. First, you can have a really good look at their online reviews. A couple of negative reviews aren't necessarily a deal breaker. We could do an entire episode on this one, and let me know if you need me to. But weddings, they're emotional events, and sometimes things don't go perfectly for reasons outside of a vendor or anyone else's control. But if you notice multiple reviews citing major issues like the vendor not delivering on contracted services, being flaky, being unprofessional, or just causing trouble, these are serious red flags. And on the other hand, if you've got a brand new vendor who's just starting out and they have no reviews, this doesn't automatically make them bad, but an established business with 0 feedback is like, there's a question mark there. It's worth investigating further. If a vendor is consistently accumulating low-star reviews or consistent complaints, in my opinion, it's probably best to steer clear of them. It's like they say when you invest, there's no promise of what they can deliver, but past history can be a really good indicator of future earnings, in this case, future service from a wedding vendor. Now, when there's negative feedback there, have a look at how the vendor responds to it. Because when a wedding vendor has been working for long enough, they will get a bad review from time to time. It's numbers. It will happen. What matters most is how they handle any negative reviews. If a vendor publicly argues with clients or responds really defensively, it can be a sign of unprofessionalism and a lack of accountability. I'm never wrong, that kind of thing. Vendors who respond with understanding and care and just a willingness to make things right are so much more likely to treat you with that same respect. So thinking back to the start of the episode, it's like a potential date. And I'm sure you've had these experiences as well, that they repeatedly speak really badly of their past relationships. Like they get really bitter about it. So red flags should be going up all over the place. Check for a lack of experience or inconsistent portfolios, especially when it comes to your photographers, your florists, your makeup artists. And if a vendor doesn't have a portfolio or their work samples are outdated or they're inconsistent, it's another warning sign because you want to see them doing things recently. You want to see high quality examples of their work that also match your style and expectations. A professional vendor will also be able to walk you through their process and answer questions about their experience with weddings similar to yours. So, maybe just think twice about vendors with little or no online presence, because you've got to ask why. In this day and age, this is how most vendors are found. I'm struggling to think of vendors who don't have a digital presence, at least a basic website or active social media. And if you can't find much information about a vendor online, or if their website looks abandoned, a bit of a ghost town, there's some tumbleweeds, it's another red flag. And similarly, if a vendor's reviews all seem to be from the same narrow time period, or they're from friends and family, it could just mean their reputation isn't as solid as it first appears. And so, a bit of an example about how this can actually show up in the real world. One of my wedding vendor colleagues told me recently about this. So, a couple booked a wedding photographer for their destination wedding, and the photographer offered to do it for free if they paid for their flights and accommodation, etc., their costs of doing business, because they wanted the experience and they wanted to use the photos as promotional material and exposure to start doing more destination weddings. I guess up front that might sound quite reasonable. But then the photographer cancelled with the couple just 2 weeks before their wedding, for what I was told was a pretty weak excuse. Now, my wedding vendor friend, the photographer who was booked and paid for, the couple actually were quite happy to pay for them, explained to me that experience is vital, especially when you're doing traveling or destination weddings, as there are so many extra things that you need to be on top of that a vendor needs to look out for and know. And they thought that this was a classic case of you get what you pay for. And if it seems too good to be true, it usually is. So, wrapping this up with red flag number 5, it is logistics and backup plan problems. Now, we all know no matter how much you plan, things will go wrong on your wedding day. But that's why logistics and backup plans are absolutely crucial. So when you're hiring vendors, you want to know they're prepared for the unexpected and not just hoping for the best. So here's what to look out for and why it matters. First of all, ask your vendors about their contingency plans. Contingency plan means when shit goes down, what will they do? So what happens if they get sick? What happens if their equipment fails? What happens, if anything else goes wrong? Because a professional vendor should have immediate and very clear answers, like they've got backup equipment, they have an assistant or a second shooter or a network of colleagues that they can call on in an emergency. And if a vendor shrugs off these questions, they tell you not to worry, or they just can't easily explain how they'd handle a problem, that's another red flag for you. Next, you want to consider the logistics of their products or services. How will they get to your venue? Do they have enough time? And this is not something that you need to work out for them. This is something that they should do. But you will get a sense from talking to them about how prepared they are. If you're booking someone who's a long way away from your venue, how are they getting there? Do they have enough time between appointments? Are they working multiple events that day? Because vendors who are overbooked or stretched too thin may arrive late, they might leave early, they might be distracted or flustered, and all of this can absolutely disrupt your wedding day flow, timeline, and it can mean a bit more down the line as well, but I don't want to freak you out. So make sure your vendor understands your timeline and has the capacity to commit fully to your event. Another warning sign is a lack of clear communication about setup and arrival times. Reliable vendors will confirm their arrival time, their setup needs, and any special requirements well in advance. And so if a vendor is vague about these details or tends to change plans at the last minute, it could, not always, but it could spell trouble. You are looking for vendors who are organised and proactive and not those who leave you guessing, as if they're just making it up as they go along. You don't need that. You need people you can count on. And finally, please ask or check, however you want to go about it, if your wedding vendors are properly insured. This is huge for venues, of course, those people who are handling expensive equipment, serving food and drink and all that. But every vendor should have insurance. It protects you, your guests, the venue, in case of accidents or damage. And if a vendor doesn't have insurance, that's a serious problem. Now, I know that logistics and backup plans might not be the most glamorous part of wedding planning, but they're essential for a stress free day. And just another reason why wedding planners are worth their weight in gold. And just to round this out, I did want to share a photographer colleague who I was chatting with on DMs. And I asked them, what are your red flags? What do you think is a red flag for a wedding vendor? And they were super hesitant to actually say anything because they don't like bad mouthing people. They just really didn't want to say negative things, but I pulled it out of them. And I thought I'd share those with you. So, from a wedding photographer's point of view, their red flags are the type of vendors who don't credit photographers in their social media posts. So, if you're not a photographer, then when you're putting a professional photo on your socials, so for me, for example, with all of the photos that I have of me performing ceremonies, conducting ceremonies, doing things like that, if it's a professional photo, obviously I haven't taken it. So the expectation, I would say, for most wedding vendors is that you thank the person who took the professional photo of you by tagging them in social media posts. And this photographer said, look, if you see vendors that aren't crediting professional photographers in their social media posts, that they're not team players and seem happy to ignore the copyright of the photos, which, the photographer who takes the photo owns the copyright of that. And it's a teamwork concern as well. Because when you work together as a team, I carry on about it all the time, weddings are a team sport, it's respect. So that is a massive ick from this particular photographer. They also said when they see photography or videography ads from an interstate or an international studio that offer all-day coverage for much cheaper rates than local businesses, couples really need to know that these companies won't be personable. The person you think you are getting may cancel at the last minute because traveling to a wedding is actually really expensive. And you'll get a replacement that you've never met. So this is not true for all situations, but there are a few companies that absolutely do this. It's almost like a bait and switch situation where they promise you one thing and they deliver something completely different. Another one is when someone says they are, inverted commas, featured in Vogue. So there are some photographers, of course, and other wedding vendors that are absolutely featured in Vogue, as in the editor has gone out and hired them to come in and do an editorial piece, and it's a big deal, right? Or if they're mentioned as an up and coming someone to watch, something like that. But 9 times out of 10, again, they have paid thousands of dollars for an ad. It's an advert, a commercial. Someone has paid money to appear within Vogue. So it's not a feature. You are not featured in Vogue. They just took your money and put your ad up. And so for this photographer, that is disingenuous, I guess. They're saying, we're featured in Vogue. No, you're in an ad in Vogue. It's very different. Also, a point that this photographer made was business industry awards. So in the wedding industry, there are a few different businesses. So I can think of Easy Weddings, Arbia, and there's one called the Wedding Industry Awards. It used to be called the Bride's Choice Award before everyone got on their case about the lack of inclusivity there. And for this photographer, they believe that people who are involved in business industry awards and who promote the fact that they do well at them are, again, not really being upfront because they believe it's a popularity contest and not awards based on talent. Now, as someone who's involved in both Easy Weddings and Arbia, I had to think about that one. I found that really interesting because I wouldn't have considered some of these points a problem. And I don't agree with them all myself, but it's always good to see things from another person, vendors, couples perspective. So I really wanted to share them with you. So just to recap, the 5 big red flags in wedding vendor behavior are: number 1, payment and pricing issues. Number 2 is poor communication and or professionalism. Generally, they go hand in hand. Number 3 is contract and business practice concerns. Number 4, reputation and experience. And the number 5, big red flag, is logistics and backup plan problems. I'd love to know your take on this. Am I being harsh? Am I being too picky? Are these important or not for you? And what would you add to these 5 red flags? Please DM me on Instagram at Unbridely and let's carry on the conversation there. I'll chat with you next week. That about wraps it up for this episode of the Unbridely podcast. For the links and resources we mentioned, please head to the show notes. And if you love the show, please review and subscribe on the podcast platform you're on now so you don't miss out on a single episode. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, weddings are a team sport. Catch you soon.